The rain hammered against the funeral home windows like bullets, each drop a reminder that even God seemed pissed off today. I stood in the back corner of Morrison's funeral parlor, watching the hypocrites file past my father's casket, their fake condolences dripping like the water from their expensive umbrellas. My name is Wesley Wes Carter, and I fix cars for a living. My hands are permanently stained with motor oil. My back aches from crawling under rusted-out Chevys, and my bank account has seen better decades. But I'm honest work, which is more than I can say for most of the people in this room. 7 years ago, I was about to marry the most beautiful woman in Millbrook Harbor. Jenna Walsh had honey blonde hair, green eyes that could make a man forget his own name, and a smile that promised forever. We were planning a small wedding, nothing fancy. I couldn't afford fancy. We'd live in the apartment above my garage, start a family, build something real together. Then my brother Kurt came back to town. Kurt Carter, 3 years older, 6 inches taller, and about $6 million richer than me. He'd made his fortune in real estate development, turning small coastal towns like ours into playgrounds for wealthy city folks. Where I saw home, he saw profit margins. It took him exactly 2 weeks to steal my fiancée. I remember the night Jenna told me. We were sitting in Murphy's Tavern, the same booth where I'd proposed 6 months earlier. She couldn't even look me in the eye. "Wes, I'm sorry, but I can't marry you," she'd said, twisting the engagement ring off her finger. "Kurt can give me things you never could. A real house, security, a future." "What about love?" I'd asked, my voice cracking like a teenager's. She'd finally looked at me then, and what I saw in her eyes was worse than hatred. It was pity. "Love doesn't pay the bills, Wes." 3 months later, she was Mrs. Kurt Carter, living in a mansion on Harbor Hill, driving a BMW, and posting pictures of her perfect life on social media for all of Millbrook to see. The family split down the middle. Mom took my side, refusing to speak to Kurt for 2 years. Dad, always the practical businessman, sided with Kurt's smart financial decisions. The town took bets on which brother would crash and burn first. 7 years later, here we were, burying the old man who'd chosen golden boy Kurt over his grease monkey younger son. I adjusted my only decent tie, the same one I'd worn to their wedding because I'm either a masochist or too broke to buy a new one, and watched Kurt make his grand entrance. He swept through the funeral home doors like he owned the place, which, knowing Kurt, he probably did. His charcoal suit cost more than I made in 3 months. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his smile practiced and political. And on his arm, sparkling like a Christmas tree, was Jenna. She'd aged well, I had to admit. Yoga classes, personal trainers, and spa treatments had kept her figure trim and her skin glowing. Her black dress was designer, her jewelry real, her confidence absolute. She surveyed the room like a queen reviewing her subjects. Their entrance caused the expected stir. Whispers rippled through the crowd, heads turned. And I caught Mrs. Larkin from next door shooting me sympathetic glances. The whole town knew our history, and they were all waiting to see how this would play out. Kurt worked the room like the politician he'd always wanted to be, shaking hands, accepting condolences, playing the grieving son. Jenna smiled and nodded at his side, the perfect supportive wife. I stayed in my corner watching the show. "Wes?" A voice beside me made me turn. It was Mike Sullivan, my old boxing coach from high school. Big Mike, we called him. 6'4" and built like a refrigerator, with hands that could crack walnuts and a heart soft as butter. "Hey, Mike," I said, grateful for a friendly face. "Hell of a thing," he said, nodding toward the casket. "Your dad was a complicated man, but he loved you boys. He had a funny way of showing it." Mike studied me with those sharp brown eyes that had coached a dozen kids to state championships. "You holding up okay? I know this can't be easy with..." He glanced toward Kurt and Jenna. "I'm fine," I lied. "You know, if you need anything..." I said I'm fine. Mike nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. "Well, you know where to find me." As he walked away, I felt more alone than ever. My daughter Casey should have been here, but she was away at college, her sophomore year at Boston University, paid for by her mother's life insurance money. We'd grown apart since her mom died 3 years ago, and I knew she blamed me for not being there enough. Maybe she was right. The service began with Father Mackenzie reading from the same tired playbook he'd used for every funeral in the past 20 years. Kurt delivered the eulogy, painting a picture of our father as a devoted family man and pillar of the community. It was a masterpiece of selective memory, conveniently forgetting Dad's drinking problem, his gambling debts, and the way he'd pit his sons against each other from the time we could walk. As Kurt spoke about family bonds that passing cannot break, I caught Jenna watching me. When our eyes met, she smiled. Not the warm smile I'd once loved, but something cold and calculating. After the service, people milled around the reception area, picking at finger sandwiches and sharing memories that got more flattering with each retelling. I was heading for the exit when Jenna intercepted me. "Wesley," she said, her voice honey-sweet with just a hint of venom. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thanks," I replied, trying to step around her. She moved to block my path, standing close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. "You know, I was just thinking about how different our lives turned out." "Were you now?" She glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned in close. Her breath was warm against my ear. She whispered, "So, I guess I won, right? You're still poor." For a moment, I felt the old rage flare up, the same fury that had consumed me 7 years ago when she'd walked out of my life. I wanted to grab her by those perfectly manicured shoulders and shake her until that smug smile cracked. Instead, I smiled back. "You sure about that, Jenna?" I said calmly, my voice so quiet only she could hear. "You might want to check the scoreboard before you start celebrating." Something flickered in her green eyes, confusion, maybe even a hint of fear. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before I could answer, Kurt appeared at her elbow, his politician smile firmly in place. "Wes, there you are, little brother. I was hoping we could talk." "About what?" "Dad's will, for starters. The reading's tomorrow at Hartwell's office." "I assume you'll be there?" "Wouldn't miss it." Kurt's smile never wavered, but his eyes were calculating. Good. I think you'll find Dad was practical in his final arrangements." "I'm sure he was." Jenna was still staring at me, trying to decode my earlier comment. I winked at her, which only deepened her frown. "Well," Kurt said, clapping me on the shoulder with false brotherly affection, "we should let you get going. I know you have to work tomorrow." "Actually," I said, reaching into my pocket, "I think you dropped something earlier." I held up Kurt's car keys, a Porsche key fob that I'd lifted from his jacket during the handshaking portion of the evening. His hand immediately went to his pocket, confirming what I already knew. "How did you he started. "Mechanic's hands," I said, tossing the keys to him. "We're good at picking things up." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Jenna hiss something to Kurt, but I didn't look back. I had work to do. Outside, the rain had turned to sleet, coating everything in a thin layer of ice. I climbed into my battered Ford pickup, 200,000 miles and still running strong, and sat for a moment, watching through the funeral home windows as Kurt and Jenna argued in hushed tones. 7 years ago, they'd humiliated me in front of the entire town. They'd taken my fiancé, my family, and my dignity. They'd left me with nothing but a failing garage and a reputation as the brother who couldn't compete. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I started the truck and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving Kurt's pristine Porsche sitting alone under the funeral home's security lights. As I drove away, I couldn't help but smile, thinking about what those cameras would capture in the next few hours. Sometimes revenge is a dish best served cold. Tonight, it was going to be frozen solid. I woke up at 5:30, same as always, to the sound of my alarm clock and the distant crash of waves against the harbor rocks. My apartment above Carter's Auto Repair wasn't much. A bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, and living room that doubled as my office, but it was mine, paid for, and it came with the best view of the harbor in town. I made coffee in the same chipped mug I'd used for 10 years and checked my phone for messages. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and enough Facebook notifications to crash a server. The first text was from Mike Sullivan, sent at 2:47 a.m. "Holy crap, Wes. Did you see what happened to Kurt's car?" I scrolled through the rest of the messages, each one more excited than the last. Apparently, sometime between midnight and dawn, someone had vandalized Kurt's Porsche in the funeral home parking lot. The car had been spray-painted with the word "thief" in bright red letters across the windshield, and all 4 tires had been slashed. The really interesting part? The funeral home's security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., leaving a convenient gap in the footage. I sipped my coffee and smiled. Amazing what you could accomplish with a can of spray paint, a sharp knife, and the knowledge that old Morty Morrison never bothered to maintain his security system properly. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Casey's number. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered. "Dad?" My daughter's voice was tight with worry. "I just saw the news about Grandpa's funeral. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Case. Sorry you couldn't make it. I wanted to come, but with midterms and everything..." She paused. "I heard about Uncle Kurt's car." "What about it?" "Dad?" Her voice carried that tone she'd inherited from her mother, the one that said she could see right through my BS. "Please tell me you didn't do anything stupid. I went to a funeral, came home, and went to bed. Nothing stupid about that. The whole town is talking about it. Mom's sister called me this morning, and she said, 'Your Aunt Linda needs to find a hobby that doesn't involve gossiping about your old man.'" Casey sighed. "Just be careful, okay? I know Uncle Kurt and Jenna hurt you, but don't let them drag you down to their level." If she only knew how far down I was planning to go. "I love you, Case. Focus on your studies and let me worry about the family drama." After we hung up, I showered, dressed in my work clothes, and headed downstairs to open the garage. Carter's auto repair had been in business for 37 years. Dad had started it when Kurt and I were kids, back when he still had dreams of building a family legacy. Now it was just me, 2 part-time mechanics, and a steady stream of cars that had seen better decades. I was under the hood of a 2003 Honda Civic when I heard the bell above the front door chime. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked into the office to find Mrs. Larkin waiting for me, her silver hair perfectly curled and her handbag clutched against her chest like armor. "Morning, Mrs. L," I said. "What can I do for you?" Eleanor Larkin had lived next door to my family for 40 years. She'd watched Kurt and me grow up, had been at every birthday party and graduation. She was also the unofficial town gossip, which made her both dangerous and useful. "Wesley, dear," she said, her voice pitched low like we were sharing state secrets. "I wanted to check on you after yesterday. Such a difficult day. And then that terrible business with Kurt's car." "Terrible business?" Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Oh yes, someone really did a number on that fancy Porsche. Spray paint, slashed tires, the works. The police were there all morning, taking pictures and asking questions." "Any leads?" "Well," she leaned closer, "between you and me, I don't think they're trying very hard to solve it. Half the town thinks whoever did it deserves a medal." I tried to look appropriately shocked. "That's awful, Mrs. L. Vandalism is still a crime, even if you don't like the sufferer." "Oh, of course, dear. I'm not saying I approve." Her smile suggested otherwise. "It's just that some people have been asking for a comeuppance for a very long time." The bell chimed again, and Tommy Rodriguez, one of my part-time guys, walked in, his face flushed with excitement. "Wes, you gotta see this," he said, waving his phone. "Someone posted pictures of Kurt's car on Facebook. It's going viral." Mrs. Larkin practically vibrated with curiosity. "Pictures?" Tommy showed us his phone screen. Someone had taken photos of the vandalized Porsche and posted them with the caption, "Karma has 4 wheels and red spray paint." The post had been shared over 300 times in the past hour. "My goodness," Mrs. Larkin breathed. "The whole town will see this." "Already has," Tommy said. "My girlfriend works at the diner, and she says it's all anyone's talking about. People are taking bets on who did it." "Any favorites?" I asked. "Well, your name's come up a few times." Mrs. Larkin shot me a sharp look. "Wesley wouldn't do such a thing. He was raised better than that." "Course not," Tommy agreed quickly. "I told everyone you're not the type for that kind of revenge." If only they knew what type I really was. The morning passed quickly with a steady stream of customers who all seemed more interested in discussing Kurt's car than their own automotive problems. By lunchtime, I'd heard 17 different theories about the vandalism, ranging from disgruntled business partners to teenage pranksters to a secret cabal of Kurt's ex-girlfriends. Around noon, Mike Sullivan stopped by with sandwiches from the deli. "Figured you might be too busy to eat," he said, settling his bulk into the chair across from my desk. "Thanks, Mike. What's the word from the boxing club?" "Same as everywhere else. Everyone's talking about your brother's car." He unwrapped his sandwich and studied me with those coaching eyes. "Funny thing, though. I was at Murphy's last night after the funeral, and I could have sworn I saw you leave around 11. "Sounds about right." But then Billy Morrison, you remember Billy, Morty's nephew, he said he was driving past the funeral home around 1:30 and saw someone in the parking lot. Someone about your height, wearing a dark jacket. I took a bite of my sandwich and chewed slowly. A lot of people about my height in this town, Mike. True enough. He nodded. Billy's been drinking heavy since his divorce, too. Makes a man's memory unreliable. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Mike spoke again. You know, I've been coaching fighters for 25 years. Taught dozens of kids how to throw a punch, how to take one, how to get back up when they're knocked down. You were a good coach. The thing about fighting, he continued, is that the best fighters aren't the ones who hit hardest. They're the ones who think 3 moves ahead, who wait for the perfect opening, who make their opponents defeat themselves. I looked up from my sandwich. That's supposed to mean something, Mike? Just thinking out loud. He stood and gathered his trash. You take care of yourself, Wes. And remember, the best victories are the ones where you don't have to throw a punch. After he left, I sat alone in my office thinking about his words. Mike was right about fighting, but he was wrong about one thing. Sometimes you had to throw a punch. You just had to make sure it counted. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the marina at 6 p.m. Come alone. Jay. Jenna wanted a meeting. Perfect. I spent the rest of the afternoon planning exactly what I was going to say to my brother's wife. 7 years of humiliation, 7 years of watching them parade their perfect life around town, 7 years of being treated like the family failure. Tonight, that was going to change. The Millbrook Harbor Marina was Kurt's latest project, a gleaming monument to gentrification that had replaced the old fishing docks where my grandfather used to work, where weathered lobstermen once mended nets, wealthy tourists now sipped wine on their yacht decks, where honest working boats once bobbed in the harbor, sleek pleasure craft now displayed their owner's net worth like floating billboards. I arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, parking my pickup between a Mercedes and a Tesla. The contrast wasn't lost on me, or on anyone else who might be watching. Jenna was waiting at the end of the main pier, silhouetted against the setting sun. She'd changed out of her funeral attire into designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, and boots that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Even in casual clothes, she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. You came, she said as I approached. You asked nicely. She turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't expected. Uncertainty. The confident woman who'd taunted me at the funeral was gone, replaced by someone who looked almost nervous. What did you mean yesterday? She asked without preamble. About checking the scoreboard? I leaned against the pier railing, taking my time before answering. Straight to the point. I always liked that about you, Jenna. Don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't pretend we're friends, Wes. We both know what this is about. Do we? You vandalized Kurt's car. Did I? The timing's too convenient. The security cameras malfunctioned the same night someone spray paints thief on his Porsche? Come on. I smiled. You know, it's interesting that you assume it was me. What does that say about your opinion of my character? It says I know you better than you think. No, I said quietly. You never knew me at all. If you had, you might have made different choices 7 years ago. Something flickered across her face. Regret maybe, or just annoyance. I made the right choice, Wes. Look at my life now. Look at yours. I am looking. Question is, are you? She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Before I could answer, voices carried across the water. A group of investors was walking toward us, Kurt at their center, gesturing grandly as he pointed out the marina's features. I recognized 2 of them, Richard Blackwood from Portland and Samuel Chen from Boston, both major players in coastal development. Jenna, Kurt called out when he spotted us. What are you doing here? She turned toward the group, her society smile snapping into place. Just getting some air. You know how I love the harbor at sunset. Kurt's eyes narrowed when he noticed me. Wesley, twice in 2 days. That might be a record for us. Just enjoying the public pier, I said. Beautiful evening for it. The investors had stopped a few feet away, clearly sensing tension but too polite to leave. Kurt had no choice but to make introductions. Gentlemen, this is my brother Wesley. He owns the auto repair shop in town. Ah, a local businessman, said Blackwood, extending his hand. Pleasure to meet you. Likewise, I replied. I've heard great things about your development work. Very transformative. Thank you. Your brother's been showing us the marina project. Quite impressive. Oh, yes, I said, warming to the topic. Kurt's always been good at transforming things, taking something that belongs to one person and making it belong to someone else. Kurt's smile grew strained. Wesley has a very nostalgic view of progress. Nothing wrong with nostalgia, said Chen. It's important to honor a community's history while building its future. Absolutely, I agreed. Take this marina, for instance. Used to be working docks where local fishermen made their living. Now it's a playground for people who can afford $50,000 boats. Some might call that progress. Others might call it theft. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Kurt's face flushed red. I think what my brother means. He started. I think your brother can speak for himself, Blackwood interrupted, studying me with new interest. You disagree with the Marina project, Mr. Carter? I disagree with the methods, I said. See, those fishermen didn't want to sell. They'd been working these docks for generations. But somehow, their leases got bought out from under them. Their permits got tangled up in red tape. Their insurance rates mysteriously skyrocketed. Funny how that works. Kurt's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. The Marina project was completely legal and above board. All the proper procedures were followed. Oh, I'm sure they were. You've always been careful about legality, Kurt. It's the ethics that get a little fuzzy. Chen and Blackwood exchanged glances. This wasn't the kind of family harmony they expected from their business partners. Well, said Blackwood carefully, family businesses can be complicated. Different perspectives and all that. Exactly. I said, for instance, I'm sure Kurt told you all about how he built his real estate empire. But did he mention how he got his start? How he convinced his first major client to leave her fiancé and marry him instead? Quite a romantic story, really. Very entrepreneurial. Jenna had gone pale. Kurt looked like he wanted to strangle me with his bare hands. I think that's enough family history for one evening, Kurt said through gritted teeth. But we're just getting to the good parts, I protested, like how easy it is to buy friends these days. Or how some people will do anything for money, even betray the people who love them most. The investors were clearly uncomfortable now. Chen cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue this tour another time, Mr. Carter. It's getting late and we have dinner reservations. Of course, Kurt said quickly, and Jenna, why don't you walk our guests back to their car? As the group moved away, I heard Blackwood murmur to his companion, family dynamics. Always a red flag in business partnerships. When they were out of earshot, Kurt turned on me with fury blazing in his eyes. What the hell is wrong with you? He hissed. Just making conversation. You're trying to sabotage my business. Am I? I thought I was sharing family stories. You always said family was important. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Stay away from my investors, Wesley. Stay away from my business, and stay away from my wife. Your wife approached me, remember? Maybe you should ask yourself why. I'm warning you. You're warning me? I laughed. Kurt, you've spent 7 years treating me like dirt under your shoe. You stole my fiancé, turned my father against me, and made me a joke in this town. And now you're warning me? I never stole anything. Jenna made her choice. Yeah, she did. Question is, does she regret it yet? Before he could answer, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. By the way, I think you dropped this earlier. His eyes went wide. Where did you get that? Same place I got your car keys yesterday. You really should be more careful with your personal belongings. I tossed the drive to him and started walking toward my truck. Oh, and Kurt, you might want to check with your investors tomorrow. I have a feeling they'll have some interesting questions about your business practices. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Kurt and Jenna in heated conversation by the pier. She was gesturing angrily. He was trying to calm her down, and both of them kept looking in the direction my truck had gone. The USB drive had been a bluff, just an old backup drive from my computer, but they didn't know that. They were probably spending the evening wondering what information I might have on them, what secrets I might be planning to expose. Let them wonder. Fear was a powerful weapon, and I was just getting started. I drove home through the darkening streets of Millbrook Harbor, past the houses where I'd grown up, past the school where Kurt and I had played football, past Murphy's Tavern, where Jenna had broken my heart 7 years ago. Tomorrow was the will reading. Tomorrow, Kurt would learn that our father hadn't been quite as practical in his final arrangements as he'd assumed. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. Hartwell, Morrison and Associates occupied a converted Victorian house on Elm Street. All dark wood paneling and leather-bound legal tomes that were probably older than the town itself. I'd been here exactly once before, when I'd needed a lawyer after my divorce from Casey's mother. That had been a different kind of family dissolution, but just as painful. I arrived 10 minutes early, partly out of habit and partly because I wanted to watch Kurt and Jenna make their entrance. They didn't disappoint. Kurt in another expensive suit, Jenna in a black dress that managed to be both funeral appropriate and stunning, both of them carrying themselves like they owned the world, which in about 20 minutes they probably thought they would. Wesley, Kurt nodded as they settled into chairs across from me in the conference room. Prompt as always. Wouldn't want to miss this, I replied. Jenna avoided eye contact, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers drummed against her purse. Our conversation at the marina had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. James Hartwell entered the room with the gravity of a man who'd been delivering life-changing news for 40 years. He was tall, silver-haired, and had the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without realizing it. Gentlemen, Mrs. Carter, he said, settling behind his mahogany desk. Thank you for coming. I know this is a difficult time, but your father's final wishes were quite specific about timing. He opened a leather folder and withdrew several documents. The will is relatively straightforward, but there are a few unusual provisions that your father insisted upon. Kurt leaned forward slightly. Unusual how? Well, let's start with the business assets. Carter's auto repair, including the building, equipment, and land, is left entirely to Wesley. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was smiling. Dad and I might have had our differences, but he'd understood which son actually knew how to fix things. That's fine, Kurt said dismissively. I never wanted the garage anyway. The house on Maple Street, Hartwell continued, along with its contents and the surrounding property, is also left to Wesley. Now Kurt's confident expression flickered. I'm sorry, what? That house is worth $300,000. Indeed, your father was quite clear about this decision. Jenna spoke for the first time. What about Kurt? He can't have left him nothing. Hartwell consulted his documents. Mr. Kurt Carter receives his father's watch collection, valued at approximately $15,000, and he paused, clearly uncomfortable. A letter. A letter? Kurt's voice was dangerously quiet. Yes, your father insisted it be read aloud in front of witnesses. Hartwell cleared his throat and began to read. To my son, Kurt, you have always been ambitious, successful, and determined to win at any cost. You built a fortune by taking what others valued and turning it to your advantage. You took your brother's fiancée because you could, not because you loved her. You took his place in my affections because it served your purposes, not because you cared about family. You are everything I taught you to be, and I am ashamed of that lesson. The watches are yours because you appreciate expensive things. The house goes to Wesley because, he understands the difference between price and value. If you're angry about this decision, look in the mirror for someone to blame. The silence that followed was deafening. Kurt's face had gone from red to white to red again, cycling through emotions like a traffic light. Jenna looked like she'd been slapped. There's more, Hartwell said gently. A trust fund was established for your daughter, Casey, Wesley. $200,000 for her education and future needs. I felt a genuine smile cross my face for the first time in days. Dad always liked Casey. He did indeed. Hartwell set down the papers. There are some additional provisions, life insurance policies, some investments, but those are the major bequests. Do you have any questions? Kurt stood abruptly, his chair was scraping against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. He was senile, sick. This will can be contested. Your father was examined by 2 physicians in the month before his end, Hartwell replied calmly. Both certified his mental competence. The will is ironclad, Mr. Carter. I made sure of that personally. We'll see about that. Kurt turned toward the door, then stopped and looked back at me. Enjoy your inheritance, little brother. But remember, money doesn't buy class, and property doesn't make you a better man. You're right, I said, but it does make me a richer one. After they left, Hartwell and I spent another hour going through the paperwork. The house alone was worth more than I'd made in the past 5 years. Combined with the garage and the land it sat on, I was suddenly worth close to $500,000. Your father was very thoughtful about this, Hartwell said as he handed me the keys to the house. He came in 6 months ago to revise the will, said he'd been watching his sons for years, and he finally understood which one had inherited his values and which one had inherited his mistakes. Did he say anything else? He said Kurt had won every battle but lost the war. And he said you were stronger than you knew, but that you'd need to prove it to yourself before you could prove it to anyone else. I drove to the house on Maple Street, my house now, and sat in the driveway for a long time. It was a modest two-story colonial, nothing fancy, but it had been home for the first 18 years of my life. Kurt had grown up here too, in the bedroom next to mine, back when we'd been brothers instead of enemies. My phone buzzed with a text from Casey. "Dad, just heard about the will. Are you okay?" I typed back, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Your grandfather left you something too. We'll talk tonight." Another text, this one from Mike Sullivan. "Heard about the will reading, drinks at Murphy's to celebrate." And then, unexpectedly, one from Jenna. "We need to talk. Please." I stared at that last message for a long time. 7 years ago, Jenna had chosen Kurt because he could give her security, status, and wealth. Now, suddenly, the balance had shifted. I wasn't rich, not by Kurt's standards, but I was no longer the broke mechanic she'd walked away from. I wondered what she was thinking right now, sitting in her mansion on Harbor Hill, looking at her successful husband, who'd just been publicly humiliated by his dead father. I wondered if she was starting to question the choices she'd made, the bridges she'd burned, the life she'd built on someone else's heartbreak. But mostly, I wondered if she was finally beginning to understand that winning and being happy weren't the same thing. I got out of the truck and walked up to the front door of my childhood home. The key turned easily in the lock, and I stepped inside to the smell of furniture polish and old memories. In the living room, on the mantelpiece above the fireplace, sat a framed photo of Kurt and me as kids. We were maybe 8 and 11, arms around each other's shoulders, gap-toothed grins, completely unaware that someday we'd become strangers. I picked up the photo and studied our young faces. We'd been happy once, before money and women and pride had torn us apart. Before we'd learned that family could be a weapon as easily as a blessing. But that was then. This was now. And now, finally, I had the ammunition I needed to finish what they'd started 7 years ago. 3 days after the will reading, I was in my new kitchen making coffee when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I watched Jenna climb out of her BMW, looking around nervously as if she expected photographers to jump out of the bushes. She'd been texting me for days, asking to meet, to talk, to clear the air. I'd ignored every message, letting her stew in whatever combination of guilt and calculation was driving her to reach out. But apparently, she'd decided to take the direct approach. I opened the door before she could knock. "Nice house," she said, trying for casual and missing by a mile. "It'll do." She was dressed down, jeans, a simple sweater, minimal makeup. It was the closest she'd looked to the girl I'd once loved since the day she'd walked out of my life. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and she walked past me into the living room. She moved carefully like she was walking through a minefield, taking in the familiar surroundings with something that might have been nostalgia. "It looks exactly the same," she said. Dad wasn't big on redecorating. She stopped in front of the mantelpiece, staring at the same childhood photo I'd been studying for days. God, we were so young. Some of us still are, apparently. She turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability the polished society wife facade had cracked, revealing glimpses of the woman underneath. "I know you hate me," she said quietly. "I don't hate you, Jenna. I hate what you did. There's a difference." "Is there?" Why, I poured myself coffee, deliberately not offering her any. "Why are you here?" "Because I need to understand something. At the funeral, you said I should check the scoreboard." "What did you mean?" "Figure it out." "Damn it, Wes." The mask slipped completely, revealing the temper I remembered from our fights. "Stop playing games with me." "Games?" I set down my mug and looked at her, really looked at her. "You think this is a game?" "I think you're trying to get revenge for something that happened 7 years ago." 7 years, 3 months, and 16 days, I said. "But who's counting?" She flinched. "Wes, you want to know what I meant about the scoreboard? Fine, let's talk about scores." I moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. 7 years ago, you left me for my brother because he was rich and I was poor. You chose money over love, status over substance. You won, right? That's what you told me at the funeral. I did what I thought was best. For you. You did what was best for you. I circled her slowly, like a lawyer addressing a jury, But here's the thing about scoreboards, Jenna. The game isn't over until it's over. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've been watching you for 7 years, watching your perfect marriage, your perfect life, your perfect facade. And you know what I've learned? She didn't answer, but her breathing had quickened. I've learned that you're miserable. The words hit her like a physical blow. She stepped backward, shaking her head. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time Kurt took you anywhere that wasn't a business function? When's the last time he looked at you like you were more than an accessory? When's the last time he made you laugh? Stop it. You know what the real scoreboard says, Jenna? It says you traded a man who loved you for a man who owns you. It says you gave up happiness for security and got neither. It says you lost everything that mattered for things that don't matter at all. Tears were streaming down her face now. You don't understand. You don't know what it's like to be afraid of being poor, of not having enough, of being with someone like me. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. I handed her a tissue from the box on the side table. And you know what? You were right to be afraid. 7 years ago, I was a broke mechanic with big dreams and small prospects. I couldn't give you the life you wanted. She wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara. Then why are you torturing me about it? Because I'm not that man anymore. I walked to the kitchen and returned with a folder full of documents. Remember my friend Danny Kozlov from high school, the computer geek who couldn't get a date? She nodded, confused by the change of subject. He started a software company 5 years ago. Security systems, mostly. Very specialized, very profitable. He needed investors. I opened the folder and showed her the first document. I gave him $50,000, my mother's life insurance money. Her eyes widened as she read the investment agreement. That $50,000 is worth $2 million today. Plus, I own 15% of a company that's about to go public. I showed her more documents. Bank statements, stock certificates, business contracts. I've been buying property quietly for 3 years. Rental houses, commercial buildings, undeveloped land. I own half the businesses on Harbor Street. She stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. But you're a mechanic. I'm a businessman who happens to fix cars. There's a difference. I took the documents back and closed the folder. You see, while you and Kurt were busy playing King and Queen of Millbrook Harbor, I was building an empire, quietly, carefully, without all the flash and show. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I learned something from watching my brother all these years. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It just is. She sank into Dad's old recliner, her perfect posture finally crumbling. So you're rich. I'm wealthy. There's a difference between being rich and being wealthy, just like there's a difference between having money and having value. Then why are you still living like what? Like a normal person? I smiled. Because I am a normal person. I just happen to have money now. I still fix cars because I like fixing things. I still live simply because I don't need stuff to make me feel important. I still drive my old truck because it runs fine and I'm not trying to impress anyone. She was quiet for a long time, processing everything I'd told her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. What do you want from me, Wes? I want you to understand something. 7 years ago, you looked at two brothers and chose the one who had money. You thought that made you smart, practical, realistic. But you made one crucial mistake. What mistake? You assumed that poor meant weak, that struggling meant failing, that being down meant staying down. I knelt in front of her chair, forcing her to meet my eyes. You never considered that the man you left might get back up stronger than before. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Wes. If I could go back, but you can't. That's the thing about choices, Jenna. You make them, and then you live with them. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the harbor where Kurt's marina gleamed in the afternoon sun. The scoreboard doesn't say I won and you lost. It says we both lost 7 years ago. The difference is, I learned from it. Behind me, I heard her crying. Not the delicate tears of a society wife, but the raw, ugly sobs of someone whose perfect world had just collapsed. What happens now? She asked when she could speak again. I turned back to her, and for a moment, I saw the girl I'd once loved, scared, vulnerable, human, but that girl had made her choice a long time ago. Now you go home to your husband and your mansion and your perfect life, I said. And you remember that every time you look in the mirror, You're looking at someone who chose money over love and got exactly what she deserved. She stood shakily, gathering what was left of her dignity. And you, what do you get out of this? Peace, I said. Finally. After she left, I sat in Dad's chair and thought about revenge. I'd planned to destroy them, Kurt and Jenna both. I'd had schemes, plots, elaborate plans for public humiliation and private devastation. I'd wanted to hurt them the way they'd hurt me. But watching Jenna break down in my living room, seeing the misery behind her perfect facade, I realized something important. They'd already destroyed themselves. Kurt had won a woman who didn't love him, built a fortune on other people's misery, and earned a reputation that would follow him forever. Jenna had traded happiness for security and ended up with neither. They were trapped in a marriage built on mutual convenience and social expectation. Two people who'd gotten exactly what they'd asked for and discovered it wasn't what they'd wanted. My phone buzzed with a text from Casey. Dad, I heard about your investments. Why didn't you tell me you were secretly rich? I smiled and typed back, because being rich isn't the point, sweetheart. Being happy is. And for the first time in 7 years, I actually was.